Marcus Johnson drummed his fingers on the steering wheel as he drove home from another long day of teaching high school mathematics. The February evening was particularly cold, with dark clouds threatening to spill snow at any moment. He had just finished grading papers during his free period and was looking forward to a quiet evening at home with a cup of hot chocolate and his favorite documentary series. Traffic moved steadily along Highway 27, and Marcus's mind wandered to his sister Lisa, who was due to give birth next month. He smiled, thinking about becoming an uncle for the first time. The clock on his dashboard read 5:45 p.m. when something caught his attention through his windshield. About 100 yards ahead, hazard lights blinked frantically on the shoulder of the road. As Marcus drew closer, he could make out a dark blue Honda Civic and a figure standing beside it. The person was wearing a thick winter coat and appeared to be talking on a phone, looking increasingly distressed. It wasn't until he was nearly alongside the vehicle that he noticed the woman's heavily pregnant belly. The sight immediately reminded him of Lisa and how vulnerable she felt during her pregnancy. Without hesitation, Marcus checked his mirrors and carefully pulled his car onto the shoulder about 20 feet ahead of the stranded vehicle. He reached for his emergency flashlight from the glove compartment, a gift from his father who had always taught him to be prepared for any situation. The bitter wind hit his face as soon as he stepped out of his warm car. Marcus pulled his jacket tighter around himself and walked back toward the Honda, making sure to stay well away from the rushing traffic. As he approached, he could see the woman was shivering, her cheeks red from the cold. She appeared to be in her early 30s, with long dark hair whipping around her face in the wind. "Excuse me, ma'am," Marcus called out, keeping his distance so as not to startle her. "I noticed you might need some help. Is everything okay?" The woman lowered her phone, relief washing over her worried face. "Oh, thank goodness," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I've been stuck here for almost an hour. I got a flat tire, and I can't get through to my roadside assistance. The wait time is over 3 hours." Marcus noted the flat tire on the passenger side of the car. The rubber was completely shredded, likely from running over something sharp. "I'm Marcus Johnson," he introduced himself with a gentle smile. "I teach at Roosevelt High School just a few miles from here. If you'd like, I can help you change that tire." The woman's eyes welled up with tears. "Really? You would do that? I'm Sarah Martinez. I just left my doctor's appointment, and I've been watching cars pass by for what feels like forever. No one stopped until you." Marcus's heart ached thinking about how many people had driven past this pregnant woman in distress. He thought about how he would feel if someone had left his sister stranded in a similar situation. "Of course I'll help. Do you have a spare tire in your trunk?" Sarah nodded, fumbling with her keys. "Yes, I think so. I've never had to use it before." As Marcus helped Sarah step away from the car's trunk, he noticed she was rubbing her lower back, likely sore from standing for so long. He opened the trunk and found the spare tire, jack, and tire iron exactly where they should be. The setup was similar to his own car, which made him feel confident about the task ahead. The rush hour traffic continued to roar past them, causing Sarah to flinch each time a large truck went by. Marcus positioned himself between her car and the oncoming traffic, creating a small barrier of safety with his body. He could see the worry lines on Sarah's forehead starting to soften, replaced by an expression of cautious relief. "Why don't you wait in my car where it's warm?" Marcus suggested, pointing to his vehicle. "I have the heat running, and you'll be safer there while I work on this. It should only take about 15 minutes. Sarah hesitated for a moment, naturally cautious about getting into a stranger's car. Marcus understood her concern and quickly added, "The doors lock automatically, and you can watch me work from there. I just don't want you standing out here in the cold in your condition." After a moment's consideration, Sarah nodded gratefully. As she made her way to Marcus's car, he began gathering the tools he would need, mentally reviewing the steps his father had taught him about changing a tire. The wind had picked up, and the first few snowflakes were beginning to fall, but Marcus felt a warmth in his heart knowing he had made the right decision to stop and help. The snow was falling more steadily now as Marcus knelt beside Sarah's car. He worked methodically, first loosening the lug nuts on the flat tire before positioning the jack under the frame. Years of helping his father in their home garage had taught him the importance of doing things in the right order. From his car, he could see Sarah watching intently. She had wrapped herself in the emergency blanket he kept in his back seat, and the warmth of the heater had brought some color back to her cheeks. Every few minutes, she would rub her pregnant belly in slow circles, a gesture that reminded Marcus of his sister's nervous habit. As Marcus raised the car with the jack, a police cruiser pulled up behind them, its lights flashing briefly to alert passing traffic. Officer Maria Rodriguez stepped out, her boots crunching in the fresh snow. She approached with a concerned expression. "Everything okay here?" she asked, shining her flashlight between Marcus and the car. Sarah rolled down the window of Marcus's car. "Yes, officer. This kind man stopped to help me with my flat tire. I've been stuck here for so long, and he's the only one who stopped." Officer Rodriguez nodded approvingly at Marcus. "Need any help, sir?" "I think I got it under control, but thank you," Marcus replied, grateful for the added safety of the police presence. "Though if you could stay until we're done, the extra lights might help keep traffic away." The officer agreed, returning to her vehicle but keeping her warning lights on. The flashing blues and reds created an extra barrier of safety around them. As Marcus worked on removing the flat tire, Sarah stepped out of his car, despite his previous suggestion to stay warm. She stood under the protection of Officer Rodriguez's watchful eye. "I hope you don't mind me asking," Sarah began, her voice carrying over the highway noise. "But why did you stop? Most people just drove past, even when they saw me waving." Marcus paused, wiping snow from his forehead with his sleeve. "My sister Lisa is 8 months pregnant," he explained, grunting as he lifted the damaged tire off. "Every time I talk to her, she tells me about some new worry she has about being alone when the baby comes. When I saw you standing here, I just thought about her." Sarah's eyes softened. "You must be a wonderful brother. I've been so scared doing this pregnancy by myself. My parents live in Arizona, and I moved here for work just last year. Today at my appointment, the doctor said my blood pressure was a bit high, and then this happened." She gestured at the flat tire, tears welling up again. Marcus stood up, brushing snow from his knees. "Being alone is tough, but you know what? Sometimes help comes from unexpected places. Which hospital do you work at?" "Children's Memorial," Sarah replied, watching as Marcus lined up the spare tire. "I'm a pediatric nurse. Been there about 10 months now." "No kidding." Marcus smiled as he began securing the spare. "That's where my students do their volunteer hours. I coordinate the high school's community service program." Small world, isn't it? As they talked, Marcus finished installing the spare tire, double-checking each lug nut to ensure they were properly tightened. Officer Rodriguez approached again, offering Sarah a business card. "There's a reliable tire shop just 3 blocks from here," she said kindly. "They're open until 8 p.m., and they're good people. Tell them Maria sent you. They'll take good care of you." Marcus lowered the car back to the ground and began packing up the tools. The snow was falling heavier now, creating a peaceful hush over the highway. Sarah insisted on helping him load the flat tire into her trunk, though he tried to dissuade her. "You really shouldn't be lifting anything heavy," he cautioned. "I lift patients all day," she laughed, then quickly turned serious. "Marcus, I don't know how to thank you enough. You have no idea what this means to me." Marcus closed her trunk with a solid thud. "Just promise me you'll get that spare replaced right away. It's not meant for long-term use." Sarah nodded, reaching into her purse. "At least let me give you some money for your time." "Absolutely not," Marcus said firmly but kindly. "Just pay it forward when you can. That's all I ask." As they prepared to leave, Officer Rodriguez gave them both a friendly wave before pulling away. The snow continued to fall, but somehow the cold February evening felt a little warmer to everyone involved. 2 days passed since the roadside encounter, and Marcus had settled back into his usual teaching routine. It was during his 3rd period mathematics class when a soft knock on the classroom door caught everyone's attention. The school secretary, Mrs. Thompson, poked her head in with an unusual smile on her face. "Mr. Johnson, you have a visitor in the main office," she announced, her eyes twinkling with knowing excitement. Marcus glanced at the clock. Still 20 minutes left in class. "Is it urgent?" he asked, looking at his students who were busy solving quadratic equations. "I think you'll want to see this," Mrs. Thompson replied. "I can watch your class for a few minutes." Curious and slightly concerned, Marcus made his way through the quiet hallways to the main office. As he pushed open the heavy door, he was surprised to see Sarah Martinez standing there, looking much more relaxed than their last meeting. She was holding a small gift bag and what appeared to be a card. "Sarah?" Marcus said, genuinely surprised. "Is everything okay? How did you find me?" Sarah smiled warmly. "Everything is perfect, thanks to you. I remembered you mentioned Roosevelt High School, and I wanted to thank you properly." She handed him the card and gift bag. "I know you didn't want any money, but I had to do something." As Marcus opened the envelope, Principal Davidson walked out of his office. He stopped short when he saw Sarah, his eyes widening in recognition. "Sarah Martinez, is that really you?" Sarah turned, her face lighting up. "Mr. Davidson, you're the principal here now? I was in your history class at Lincoln High 10 years ago." The principal laughed heartily. "Indeed. Best essay on the Civil War I've ever read. And look at you now, a nurse and soon-to-be mother. What brings you to our school?" Sarah's eyes grew misty as she recounted the story of Marcus stopping to help her on the highway. As she spoke, other teachers and staff members gathered around, drawn by the touching narrative. Marcus stood quietly, touched by Sarah's emotional retelling of events he had considered simply the right thing to do. "That doesn't surprise me one bit," Principal Davidson said, clapping Marcus on the shoulder. "Mr. Johnson here has been making a difference since the day he started teaching with us. Just last month, he spent his own money buying lunch for 3 students whose meal accounts were empty." Marcus felt his cheeks grow warm. "Anyone would have done the same," he said softly. "No," Sarah insisted, her voice firm. "They wouldn't. I stood on that highway for an hour, watching car after car pass by. Some people even slowed down to look but kept driving. You were the only one who stopped." She reached into her purse and pulled out an ultrasound picture. "I had my follow-up appointment yesterday. My blood pressure is back to normal, and the doctor says the baby is perfect. This is my daughter." She handed the image to Marcus. "I've decided to name her Hope." The gathered staff members collectively sighed at this revelation, and Mrs. Thompson discreetly wiped away a tear. "You know," Principal Davidson said thoughtfully, "this is exactly the kind of story our students need to hear. Marcus, would you mind if we featured this in our school newsletter? It's a powerful reminder that small acts of kindness can make a big difference." Before Marcus could respond, the bell rang, signaling the end of third period. The hallway outside began to fill with the familiar sounds of students changing classes. Sarah touched her belly gently. "I should get going. My shift starts soon. But I wanted you to know that what you did meant everything to me. Not just changing the tire, but treating me with such respect and kindness when I felt so vulnerable." As she turned to leave, she added, "And I've already paid it forward, just like you asked. Yesterday, I helped an elderly man find his way to the correct department in our hospital. He was so confused and scared, and I remembered how I felt on that highway. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stop and help." Marcus watched her leave, then looked down at the ultrasound picture still in his hand. A small note was written in the corner. "To the kind stranger who became a friend. Thank you for showing me that angels don't always have wings. Sometimes they just have tire irons and warm cars." The gathered staff slowly dispersed, leaving Marcus standing there, holding the picture and feeling a profound sense of connection to this unexpected moment in his life. He carefully tucked the ultrasound into his shirt pocket, close to his heart, before heading back to his classroom. The school newsletter story about Marcus's roadside assistance spread faster than anyone expected. By the end of the week, Marcus sat uncomfortably in his classroom as the camera crew set up their equipment. He had never sought attention for his actions, and the bright lights and microphones made him nervous. Student artwork and mathematical formulas covered the walls behind him, creating a colorful backdrop for the interview. "So, Mr. Johnson," Jessica began, adjusting her microphone, "we've heard about your encounter with Sarah Martinez, but our research suggests this isn't the first time you've gone out of your way to help others." Before Marcus could respond, there was a commotion at the classroom door. Tamika Williams, a sophomore student, burst in despite the recording in progress sign. "Sorry to interrupt," Tamika said breathlessly, "but I have to tell my story too." The camera crew turned to capture her unexpected entrance. Marcus recognized Tamika as one of his students from the previous semester, a bright girl who had struggled with mathematics initially but worked hard to improve her grades. Mr. Johnson stayed after school 3 times a week to help me understand algebra. Tamika had explained to Jessica, her words tumbling out eagerly. He never asked for anything in return, and he even bought me a scientific calculator when he found out I couldn't afford one. Now I have a B+ in advanced mathematics. Jessica's eyes lit up at this new angle. Would you mind sharing your story on camera? As Tamika began speaking, more students gathered in the hallway. Word had spread that a news crew was in the building, and several students wanted to share their own experiences with Mr. Johnson's kindness. Carlos Rodriguez, a senior, spoke about how Marcus had helped his family find resources when they were struggling with bills. He connected us with the school's support services and even drove my mom to the welfare office when her car broke down, Carlos revealed, his voice thick with emotion. The initial simple story about changing a tire was transforming into something much larger. Principal Davidson joined the growing crowd, bringing with him a thick folder. These are letters from parents and students about Mr. Johnson, he explained to Jessica. We've received dozens of them over the years, but Marcus always insisted we keep them private. He never wanted recognition. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair as Principal Davidson read excerpts from the letters. One described how he had purchased winter coats for twin sisters who had recently immigrated from Venezuela. Another told the story of him organizing a weekend math tutoring program for students who worked after school and couldn't attend regular study sessions. The camera kept rolling as more students shared their stories. Emily Chen, a junior, talked about how Marcus had helped her father, who spoke limited English, navigate parent-teacher conferences by learning basic Mandarin phrases to make him feel welcome. In the middle of the impromptu sharing session, Sarah Martinez appeared at the doorway, still in her nurse's scrubs. She had heard about the news coverage and had come straight from her shift at the hospital. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said, smiling at the crowd. But I brought someone who wanted to meet Mr. Johnson properly. Behind her stood Lisa, Marcus's pregnant sister, who had recognized Sarah from the school newsletter photo. The two pregnant women had connected through social media after Lisa saw the story, and they had quickly formed a friendship. They now attended the same prenatal yoga classes and had planned to support each other during their upcoming deliveries. Jessica Chen, sensing the perfect conclusion to her story, asked Marcus how it felt to see the ripple effects of this simple decision to stop and help someone in need. Marcus looked around his classroom at the gathered faces, his students, his colleagues, Sarah, and his sister, all connected by threads of kindness he had woven without even realizing it. I just believe that we're all responsible for each other, he said quietly. Teaching isn't just about mathematics. It's about showing students that everyone has the power to make a difference in someone else's life. Sometimes it's as simple as stopping your car on a snowy evening, and sometimes it's staying late to help someone understand quadratic equations. The size of the act doesn't matter. It's the decision to act that counts. As the camera crew packed up their equipment, Principal Davidson announced that the school board had decided to establish an annual Marcus Johnson Community Service Award for students who demonstrated exceptional kindness and service to others. Marcus simply smiled, already thinking about how he could use this attention to create more opportunities to help others in need. The morning after the news segment aired, Marcus arrived at school to find his inbox flooded with emails. Local businesses, community organizations, and even strangers from neighboring cities had reached out after watching his story. Among these messages, one particularly caught his attention, an email from James Rodriguez, the owner of Rodriguez Tire Company, the largest tire retailer in the state. Your story touched my heart, James wrote. I started my business 30 years ago changing tires on the side of the road, just like you helped Sarah. I'd like to meet with you to discuss an idea. Marcus read the email several times during his lunch break, wondering what the businessman had in mind. He didn't have to wait long to find out. That afternoon, a sleek black car pulled into the school parking lot, and James Rodriguez himself walked into the front office. James was a tall man with kind eyes and work-roughened hands that spoke of years of manual labor before becoming a successful business owner. He carried a folder under his arm and wore a simple suit that seemed at odds with his casual demeanor. Mr. Johnson, he said, extending his hand, what you did for that pregnant woman. It reminded me of why I started my business in the first place. People shouldn't have to feel helpless on the side of the road. Principal Davidson offered his office for their meeting, and as they sat down, James laid out his proposal. He wanted to launch a new program called Roadside Angels, a free service specifically for pregnant women, elderly citizens, and disabled individuals who found themselves stranded with car troubles. "We want you to be the face of this program," James explained, spreading out some preliminary marketing materials. "Your story shows exactly what we want to represent: ordinary people helping others in their moment of need." Marcus listened carefully, touched by the idea but hesitant about being in the spotlight again. "It's a wonderful initiative," he said slowly, "but I'm just a math teacher. I'm not sure I'm the right person for this." James smiled knowingly. "That's exactly why you're perfect for it. You're not a celebrity or a politician. You're someone who saw a need and took action. That's what we want to encourage others to do." As they discussed the details, Sarah Martinez unexpectedly appeared at the office door, this time accompanied by Dr. Helen Chang, the chief of staff at Children's Memorial Hospital. "Sorry to interrupt," Sarah said, "but when I heard Mr. Rodriguez was coming here today, we wanted to join the conversation. We have an idea too." Dr. Chang stepped forward, her professional demeanor softened by an enthusiastic smile. "After hearing about what happened, we've been discussing starting a random acts of kindness program at the hospital. We see people at their most vulnerable moments, and sometimes a simple act of kindness can make all the difference." The meeting evolved into an impromptu brainstorming session. Principal Davidson called in the student council president, Maria Santos, who suggested connecting these initiatives with the school's community service program. The ideas flowed freely: a volunteer network for helping stranded motorists, a mentorship program pairing high school students with hospital patients, and community workshops on basic car maintenance. James Rodriguez made an unexpected announcement. His company would provide free tire services for life to Marcus and Sarah, and they would offer significant discounts to all teachers and healthcare workers in the community. "But that's not all," James added, his eyes twinkling. "We're establishing a scholarship fund for students who demonstrate exceptional community service. We're calling it the Johnson Martinez Scholarship, if you both agree to that." Marcus and Sarah exchanged surprised looks. Their chance encounter on a snowy highway was now spawning initiatives they never could have imagined. As the meeting concluded, a small crowd of students had gathered outside the office, having heard about Mr. Rodriguez's visit. Among them was Carlos, the senior whose family Marcus had helped earlier in the year. "Mr. Johnson," Carlos called out, "the auto shop class wants to help too. We can learn basic tire changing and car maintenance so we can volunteer with the Roadside Angels program." Marcus stood in the hallway, surrounded by people eager to build upon this simple act of kindness. He thought about all the times he taught his students that mathematics was about patterns and connections, how one small change could affect an entire equation. Now he was watching that principle play out in real life, as his decision to stop and help one person was creating a web of connections and opportunities for others to help each other. The bell rang, signaling the end of another school day, but for Marcus and everyone involved, it felt more like a beginning. The Roadside Angels program launched on a bright spring morning, exactly 1 month after Marcus's encounter with Sarah. The parking lot of Roosevelt High School had been transformed into a community event space. Local television stations set up their cameras as James Rodriguez proudly unveiled a fleet of 5 bright blue service vehicles, each emblazoned with the Roadside Angels logo, a tire with wings. The first vehicle bore a small dedication plaque that read, "Inspired by Marcus Johnson, because kindness changes everything." Marcus stood to the side of the stage, still uncomfortable with all the attention. He watched as Sarah, now in her 9th month of pregnancy, cut the ceremonial ribbon with James. Her presence had become a familiar sight at the school, as she helped coordinate the program's training sessions during her maternity leave. "Today marks the beginning of something special," James announced to the gathered crowd. "Thanks to our partnership with Roosevelt High School and Children's Memorial Hospital, we're not just changing tires, we're changing lives." The program had evolved beyond its original scope. The auto shop students, led by their teacher Mr. Martinez, no relation to Sarah, had completed their certified training as roadside assistance technicians. They would work part-time with Rodriguez Tire Company while earning school credit and valuable experience. Carlos Rodriguez, who had since been accepted to engineering school with a full Johnson Martinez scholarship, demonstrated the proper technique for changing a tire to the audience. His younger sister Maria translated his instructions into Spanish, making the demonstration accessible to the entire community. During the presentation, Marcus noticed an elderly woman in the crowd looking confused and distressed. He quietly made his way over to her. "Is everything all right, ma'am?" he asked gently. The woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Chen, explained that she had come hoping to sign up for the program, but was overwhelmed by the crowds and paperwork. Without hesitation, Marcus found her a quiet spot in his classroom and helped her complete the registration forms. As they talked, Mrs. Chen revealed she was Emily Chen's grandmother, the same Emily whose father Marcus had helped with parent-teacher conferences. "In our culture," she said softly, "we believe that good deeds create circles that never end. You helped my son-in-law feel welcome, and now you help me. Tomorrow, I will help someone else." When they returned to the event, Sarah was sharing how the hospital's Random Acts of Kindness program had already made an impact. Children's Memorial had created a special parking area for expectant mothers and elderly visitors, and volunteers were available to escort patients to their appointments. The hospital staff had also started a kindness cart that traveled through the wards, offering free essential items to families who were staying with sick children. The idea had come from Marcus's sister Lisa, who had spent a night in the hospital during a pregnancy scare and realized how many parents came unprepared for extended stays. James Rodriguez took the microphone again to make another announcement. His company was expanding the program to include free basic car maintenance classes for single parents, elderly citizens, and new drivers. The classes would be held at Roosevelt High School's auto shop, creating a permanent connection between the school and the community. But the best part, James said with a broad smile, is that we've already received calls from tire companies in other cities wanting to start their own Roadside Angels programs. What began here, with one man stopping to help one woman, is spreading across the state. As if to demonstrate the program's importance, a call came in during the event. A stranded motorist needed help just a few miles away. Without fanfare, Carlos and his team loaded up one of the new service vehicles and headed out, putting their training into immediate action. Marcus watched them go, feeling a complex mix of emotions. He thought about the mathematical concept of exponential growth, how small numbers could become large ones through a series of multiplications. That's what kindness was like, he realized. Each good deed multiplied itself through the actions of others. The event concluded with Sarah announcing the creation of a community database where people could both offer and request help. "Sometimes the hardest part is asking for assistance," she said, resting her hand on her belly. "We want to make it easier for people to connect with those who can help." As the crowd began to disperse, Marcus noticed Mrs. Chen helping an overwhelmed young mother calm her crying baby. The circles of kindness were already growing, spreading outward like ripples in a pond, touching lives in ways he never could have imagined. On a warm June morning, the auditorium of Children's Memorial Hospital buzzed with excitement. The Random Acts of Kindness program was celebrating its 3-month anniversary, and Sarah Martinez, now holding her 2-week-old daughter Hope, was. The auditorium was filled with an unusual mix of people: hospital staff in scrubs, mechanics in their Rodriguez Tire Company uniforms, high school students, and community members whose lives had been touched by the growing movement. In the front row, Marcus's sister Lisa sat with her 1-month-old son, Tommy, who had been born just 2 weeks before Hope. As Marcus stepped onto the stage, he pulled out the worn ultrasound picture Sarah had given him months ago. "This picture," he began, holding it up, "reminds me that we never know how one small action might change countless lives." He shared stories that had emerged since the program's inception. There was the elderly man who had been helped by one of Carlos's roadside assistance teams and then volunteered to teach basic car maintenance in Spanish at the community center. A group of nurses had started a carpool system for patients who couldn't afford transportation to their appointments. Last week, Marcus continued, "One of my students asked me what mathematics has to do with kindness. I told her that kindness, like mathematics, is about patterns and relationships. One act connects to another, multiplies, grows, and creates something larger than we could imagine." As if on cue, baby Hope began to fuss. Sarah gently rocked her, and Lisa immediately offered her support, demonstrating the unexpected friendship that had formed between the two new mothers. They had been attending the same parent support groups and often helped other new mothers navigate the challenges of early parenthood. Dr. Chang took the podium next, presenting impressive statistics. Hospital patient satisfaction scores had increased by 30% since the program's introduction. The emergency room had established a new protocol where volunteers helped families navigate the often stressful environment. Even the hospital cafeteria had started a suspended coffee program, where people could pay for extra drinks or meals that would be given to those in need. James Rodriguez, who had become a regular visitor at both the school and hospital, shared his own update. The Roadside Angels program had expanded to 3 neighboring states, with more locations planning to launch soon. The auto shop students have provided assistance to over 200 stranded motorists, many of whom had gone on to volunteer themselves. But the numbers don't tell the whole story, James said. It's about the elderly gentleman who received help changing his tire and now brings homemade cookies to our mechanics every week. It's about the pregnant woman who was helped last month and is now organizing a baby supply drive for new mothers in need. Principal Davidson announced that Roosevelt High School's community service participation had reached record levels. Students were creating their own initiatives: a homework help program, a senior citizen technology support team, and a school supply exchange system. Mr. Johnson taught us that mathematics isn't just about numbers, said Maria Santos, now a graduating senior. It's about seeing patterns and making connections. That's what this program does. It connects people who need help with those who can provide it. As Marcus listened to the speeches, he noticed Mrs. Chen in the audience, sitting next to Sarah's parents who had flown in from Arizona to meet their new granddaughter. They were sharing pictures on their phones, 2 families from different backgrounds brought together by circumstance and kindness. The event concluded with an announcement that surprised even Marcus. The hospital and Rodriguez Tire Company were jointly establishing a community center in the neighborhood, a place where people could come for help, offer assistance, or simply connect with others. The center would be named the Hope Center, after Sarah's daughter, who had unknowingly sparked this movement through her mother's flat tire. As people mingled after the ceremony, Marcus watched Sarah introduce Hope to some of the nurses who had supported her through her pregnancy. His sister Lisa joined them, Tommy sleeping peacefully in her arms. Around them, students chatted with mechanics about upcoming training sessions, hospital volunteers exchanged ideas with community organizers, and new connections formed. A young reporter approached Marcus for a comment about the program's success. He thought for a moment, then smiled. Success isn't measured by the number of tires we change or the services we provide, he said. It's measured by the connections we make and the way those connections inspire others to create their own circles of kindness. In the background, baby Hope cooed softly, as if agreeing with his words. 1 year had passed since that snowy evening on Highway 27. The Hope Center was decorated with balloons and streamers for a very special celebration, Hope Martinez's first birthday party. The guest list had grown far beyond a typical baby's birthday celebration, becoming a community gathering that celebrated not just Hope's first year, but the incredible chain of events her birth had set in motion. Marcus arrived early, carrying a small gift wrapped in pink paper. The mathematics teacher had grown more comfortable with attention over the past year, though he still preferred to stay in the background. He watched as Sarah arranged cupcakes on a table, while Hope played in a playpen nearby, supervised by Marcus's sister Lisa and her son Tommy. The community room quickly filled with familiar faces. Carlos, now a successful first-year engineering student, arrived with his sister Maria. They had driven one of the Roadside Angels vehicles to help 3 stranded motorists on their way to the party. Mrs. Chen brought her famous dumplings, which she now regularly taught others to make at the center's weekly cooking classes. Principal Davidson came with a special surprise: a bound book containing letters and photos from all the people who had been helped by the various programs over the past year. The title read, Hope's First Year: How One Flat Tire Changed Our Community. James Rodriguez arrived with his entire family, an announcement that made Sarah tear up. The Roadside Angels program had now spread to 15 states, with more joining every month. Each new location started by helping one person, then watching the kindness multiply. And it all started with you, Marcus, James said, raising his glass of punch in a toast. One man who chose to stop on a cold evening. Marcus shook his head modestly. It started with all of us, he corrected. Each person who chose to take that initial kindness and pass it forward. Dr. Chang shared updates from the hospital. The Random Acts of Kindness program had become a model for other medical facilities across the country. The Kindness Cart now operated in every ward, and a network of volunteers helped ensure no patient or family member ever felt alone during their hospital stay. As the party continued, Sarah gathered everyone's attention. Standing next to the birthday cake, with Hope on her hip, she had an announcement to make. "When I stood on that highway a year ago, I felt alone and scared," she began. "But that moment led to all of this, to friendships, to community, to hope." She paused, smiling at her daughter. "And now, I'm happy to announce that I've been appointed as the first director of community outreach for Children's Memorial Hospital. We're going to make sure every patient feels as supported as I did." The room erupted in applause. Marcus watched as Hope, not understanding the celebration but enjoying it nonetheless, clapped her tiny hands along with everyone else. She had her mother's smile, and, everyone agreed, a special kind of light in her eyes. Near the end of the party, as families gathered for photos and children played with balloons, Marcus found himself standing next to the wall of photos that documented the year's events. There was the launch of Roadside Angels, the opening of the Hope Center, countless images of people helping others in various ways. A new student volunteer, puzzled by the scale of it all, asked Marcus, "How did a flat tire lead to all of this?" Marcus smiled, thinking of how he often explained exponential growth to his mathematics students. "It's like dropping a pebble in a pond," he explained. "The ripples keep growing, touching things you never expected them to reach. Each person who was helped became motivated to help others, and those people helped even more people. Kindness, when given the chance, naturally multiplies." As if to demonstrate his point, he watched as Mrs. Chen taught Hope how to wave goodbye to departing guests, while Sarah and Lisa made plans for their children's next playdate. Carlos was explaining basic car maintenance to a group of interested parents, and James Rodriguez was discussing plans to expand the program to even more communities. The birthday party wound down as the sun set, casting warm light through the windows of the Hope Center. Hope had fallen asleep in her mother's arms, unaware that she was the namesake of a movement that had changed countless lives. Marcus gathered his things to leave, but paused at the door. On the wall hung the framed ultrasound picture he had received a year ago, now surrounded by hundreds of photos of people helping people. Below it, a simple plaque read, "Every act of kindness creates endless ripples."